Anybody that we talked about, W.C. Fields, the Marx Brothers, none of them are stand-up. The emphasis now is almost entirely on monologists, what they used to call people who do monologues, on stand-ups. And it's probably because I've always said this, and I know the stand-up is in the title of your show, but there's sort of a prejudice now that you're only a comedian if you're a stand-up comedian, which never used to be true, but it is within the last at least 40 years. It's been thought of that way. And it's probably because it doesn't require any production. Any sushi restaurant becomes a stand-up joint on Wednesday nights.
Get your comedy here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not pinning all of my hopes on comedy, obviously. I'm in a laundromat.
I call it like, it's like guitars.
Right.
You know how like in the beginning of the music business, when the recording industry and everything began, there were orchestras and people really played instruments and and nowadays, most people who own a guitar can't really play it. They just know how to strum a couple of chords so they can sing their crappy songs.
I guess I'll let the guitar do the talking for a start.
So it's like, it's the reason why the guitar is so popular, because there's no production. You don't have to carry a piano around.
Right, yeah.
So anybody can call themselves a comedian if they just show up to an open mic, but there used to be no distinction of value between if somebody did something, someone, and they were called monologists, they weren't called stand-ups.
Yeah, because I think the first ones was like Mark Twain or even Will Rogers were like some of the first two original.
I guess you could say Mark Twain.
Man is really the most interesting jackass there is. It's his idea, you see, that the deity sits up nights to admire him.
If you wanted to point out somebody who really is one of the pioneers of monology, who really would be a pioneer of stand-up, is a comedian named Frank Fay.
Yeah, he was known as the first stand-up.
Yeah, Frank Fay was a stand-up comedian, very sarcastic.
They wanted a sad singer, and after the Warners heard me, they said, well, he's about as sad as you can get him. So, ladies and gentlemen, I was picked.
I think he was married or engaged to Barbara Stanwyck at one point. He was very popular and also known by like most of the big comedians as a big anti-Semite. So he wasn't a very popular guy. And because of his drinking and stuff like that, he had a lot of missed opportunities and became a failure. But he was a big deal. I mean, he was even in the original, I think he was in the original Broadway production of the play Harvey. The guy who sees the rabbit. The guy who sees the rabbit, he made a movie with Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah.
Originally Frank Fay, I think. And Frank Fay lost all his opportunities for being a dick and people didn't like him. It's like fat people who use initials for their names. It's like people like that who ruin their, reputation. But yeah, no, there's a lot of people. I was talking to somebody once that we know. I'll tell you who I was talking to Danielle Asher. Danielle.
Oh yeah, of course, Danielle. She's awesome.
And I was talking to her once about influence, and she was like, "Well, the people who are more famous are more influential," and I disagreed. I said, "You could be very influential and be completely forgotten, and it doesn't matter if." And like Frank Fay is a perfect example. Fred Allen is a great example. And my big argument to that is that probably the most influential person in the past 1,000 years would have been Johannes Gutenberg, who invented the printing press and sort of because of that spread information all around the world. But most people don't know who he is, and they know who Cardi B is.
And they know who
is not as influential as Johannes Gutenberg. It's just true.
And they know who Steve Gutenberg is.
Is this a game? Is this like a game to you?
And who is only a little less influential than Johannes Gutenberg. But so there's a lot of people who are influential that aren't very well remembered. Then there are people who are so well known that they're taken for granted. I would definitely put Bing Crosby in that sort of loop. He's sort of thought of as just a guy who sang Christmas songs. People don't remember how extremely influential he was as a vocalist and a jazz singer and a pop singer, and how he still is the most successful singer of all time with most #1 hits, the most recordings of all time still.
So the bluebirds and the blackbirds got together.
The reason why I'm bringing him up is because of Bob Hope. Bob Hope is very, very influential, and people sort of take him for granted. You don't ever hear any comedians mention Bob Hope as their influence. I mean, contemporary people.
Right. Yeah.
You know? Even if they might mention Chaplin before they'll ever mention Bob Hope, you know. And Bob Hope he was a stand-up all his life too. He never stopped performing live. He never stopped doing monologues. He had a radio show, the television shows. He's the most successful movie star comedian, making 60 films, being a huge star. His movies are still hilarious. But what he really did that was influential is he took the jokes. Let me put it this way. Before Bob Hope, the comedians, even on the radio and stuff, would tell you a joke like this. A guy went to the store the other day, and that's how they tell you the joke. Right. And Hope did a little change. And his little change was, I was going to the store the other day. It sounds little, but it's actually a big difference. What happens is it makes it about him.
Right.
Now he's not telling you individual jokes. He's telling you the story of him.
Well, election day is almost over, and I'm pretty tired. My uncle ran for office in Eagle Knob, California, and I've been voting all day. But it doesn't pay, to be honest. I voted 12 times a day, and I only got paid for 10.
And it sounds like nothing, but it's actually a big change in comedy. And after that, more people did that, and now everybody does that. Nobody does individual jokes.
What I like about you is that you kind of continue on with these traditions of like a Bob Hope, where you can do the stand-up, you're good on camera, and you sing, and you have that whole old school kind of vibe, and you're carrying that torch that I think gets forgotten.
Hold a reef, hold a eye, you will see, and you're gonna wink your eye, good for me.
Well, I like show business. I like show business, and a lot of the trend for comedy within the last 20 years was to, especially because the emphasis was on stand-ups, and was to not be show busy about it, and the idea was to be, to seem like you were an intellectual.
Really get into trouble. I have a clock that runs counterclockwise for some reason.
Like people mistake, like, let's go back to Pryor. Like, people mistake Richard Pryor. He's not an intellectual. He's telling you stories about his life. He's also telling you stories about hunting a bear in the woods.
But in the jungle, if you see a rabbit, you get nervous. Because the rabbit be looking at you and I'm roll the window up there. It's just a rabbit, fuck you. Ain't no rabbit ever looked at me like that.
These are ridiculous stories that are, if you think about his routines, they're hilarious, but they all involve him going, oh shit, making faces and all these funny things that a clown does, that a regular slapstick comic does, that Jerry Lewis does. Jerry Lewis was a huge influence on especially early Richard Pryor, because the people who wrote about him afterwards, because of what we know about his personal life, right, they sort of made his comedy serious to the reader about it, and then you had to analyze it. And so the worst thing you can do is become too high-minded and start to think of yourself as, because, and you get a lot of that, and there's too many, and what happens is then you get rid of the show business of it. The trick, the real trick, this. The real trick is to always make it seem like you didn't have to try very hard, like it's all very natural. And you put a lot of work in. You put a lot of work into it. You suffer for it, but you try to make it seem like it's very off the cuff and no big deal and everything like that. But then there became this sort of this trend of like, and this is, I'm old school, so I don't like this, like going on stage with notes and things to show how learned you are and how you're studying and everything, like even if I was going to go to an open mic, even if I was working out material, I certainly wouldn't let myself look like I was working out material. Like I'd always want to look nice. Put it this way, I combed my hair just to do this Zoom with you.